Sometimes as a coach that you can try to will things into existence, and you can kind of, like, one of my starting points of how I just view this whole game is, like, I have a job to do to put people in position to succeed, but, like, I never am responsible for the results that are good. Like, I could call a terrible play and it works, or I could call the perfect play and it doesn't work. It's the players and putting them in position for success.
Keep it open or close it out. That was Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel.
Good guy. You know, he just letting you know that he calls plays.
Yeah, he just goes sometimes. And you never really know where you're going to end up.
His Hard Knocks speech where he was self-critiquing his own garbage play calls against the Titans is must-watch television. He is truly a national treasure, Mike McDaniel.
A character, that Mike McDaniel. All right, keep it open or close it out, as we always do on Wednesdays here at the Happy Hour Bar. Our version of Start, Sit, and Lawrence. Who would think during championship week our keep it open or close it out top name would be Joe Flacco against the Jets? Yeah. And he actually comes in as QB 22 for Matthew this week. Where does he come in for you?
For me, this particular week, he comes in at quarterback 19. Liked him a lot last week. Much different matchup there against the Texans. 300 passing yards and at least 2 touchdowns in 3 straight games. He's thrown the ball at least 42 times in all 4 of his starts since becoming the Cleveland Browns' new franchise quarterback. However, the Jets have allowed under 10 fantasy points to quarterbacks in 4 of their last 5 games. The important thing here is even when the Jets do give up something on defense, fantasy-wise, they're not giving points to quarterbacks. Like, we just saw Tua have a good, real football game against the New York Jets, but Tua was outside of quarterback 15 in fantasy. So be wary of that. If you're in the championship super flex, you're probably having to start them just with the volume alone. But if we're talking about a 1 quarterback league, I'd actually roll with somebody like Baker Mayfield over Joe Flacco this week, so I'm closing it out.
Yeah, I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on Flacco, and I say that acknowledging that he was magnificent against Houston. He was better than his stat line, and his stat line was pretty freaking good. But he's done this against defenses like Houston, who are missing half their defense, the Rams, who don't have a great defense, the Jags, who are really floundering, and against the Bears, he really struggled. But what Flacco is giving you, he's just giving you sheer volume. He's giving you sheer pass attempts. But against the Jets defense, this is a substantially better pass defense than any he has played, including Chicago. So I wouldn't be expecting efficiency, but you can probably do worse just because you can be confident he's going to drop back 35 times at least.
Right. I think you brought up a good point, Lawrence, that Superflex at this point, you know, where else are you going to go right now? Yeah. But another thing to kind of piggyback off what you said, the Jets are a chaotic combination to start quarterbacks against because the defense is really good. Okay, great quarterbacks can overcome that. The Jets' offense is usually horrific to the point where the game script doesn't really match that opposing quarterback needs to drop back and throw. Now, with Flacco and this Browns offense, we've seen that they don't care. Yeah. They're willing to do that.
They do not care.
But I think you're almost relying on Trevor Siemian to go out there and get 14 to 17 points against the Browns defense for Flacco to have the game script to be productive from a fantasy perspective, and I don't see that from Siemian in this one.
That too.
I agree.
Yeah, that's an important thing too. If they can't stay on the field, because you know they're going to keep everything underneath. Every pass they thrown, the Jets in Week 16 was short to intermediate. So if that's not moving the chains like it did against the Commanders, well then you're like you said, maybe Flacco finally doesn't throw the ball 50 times.
Our next one, Ty Chandler against a Joe Barry Packers defense, Jay, that has just had some really bad outings against struggling quarterbacks at this point. And Chandler, he's had his moments in this Minnesota offense this year.
Yeah, I would keep it open on Ty Chandler. Now, he struggled a bit more against the Lions. He struggled in pass protection in particular, but I don't think they really have another option. And this is mainly just a reflection of Green Bay's run defense, which has been absolutely atrocious this year. I think back particularly to that Monday night game against the Giants where Saquon and the great, now since departed, Tommy DeVito just eviscerated them on the ground. So I think he can feel confident enough in the matchup, even if though he's probably not going to do what he did against Cincinnati, for instance.
Yeah, it could be something that was in between what he did against the Lions and what he did the week prior there when he was one of the top backs. Over the last 4 weeks, Green Bay, you mentioned their running defense, their bottom 5 run defense the past 4 weeks, and prior to week 16, Green Bay has allowed 100+ rushing yards to running backs in 4 straight games. So the beauty of this, and we saw Alexander Mattison back, that's key too. He didn't come back and, they didn't split touches or nothing like that. Ty Chandler in for 75% of the team's rushes over the last 2 weeks, including when Mattison was in the backfield. So I think it's clear they want to roll with him here on out. We still got to see what they're going to do at quarterback. But I'm going to keep it open at Ty Chandler. This week I have him as running back 24, so that's lower end running back 2.
Good bounce back spot for Ty Chandler after a tough week. Our next one, Achane. Back-to-back games with single-digit fantasy points for Achane, Lawrence. But the reality is, the last time Jalen Waddle was out, Achane ran absolutely wild in Week 3 against the Broncos. Jalen Waddle probably out this week.
Yeah, they said they won't rule him out, but it's a high ankle sprain, and it's hard to when you're cutting that. That's hard. Devon Achane, while it's tough to envision him running for 203 yards against the Ravens like he did in Week 3 against the Broncos. But, Raheem Mostert's a little banged up too. He's no sure thing. He was in and out of the game. 14.3% target share in that game a while back. But even recently, Devon Achane looks to be, he's been the guy they want to rely on in the receiving game out of the backfield. So you mentioned Waddle more than likely being out. We'll still have to see what happens with that. But they'll just need another playmaker. So without Waddle, you got Tyreek Hill. Now you got to look to Achane to just create more plays, and Tua has shown he'll throw it over the top for him. I got him at running back 23, which means I'm keeping it open for Devon Achane.
Yep, no, I'm with you. I'd keep it open as well. Just in the past 3 minutes, it's come out, Cameron Wolfe reporting by Mike McDaniel that Jalen Waddle's high ankle sprain is not overly severe. You guys remember the good old days where a high ankle sprain was like 4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah.
And now these high ankle sprains keep getting lower and lower and lower.
Yeah.
But regardless, you wouldn't expect that he's going to be at 100% if he does play, which I agree with you, Connor, would seem to be still in some doubt. But the one thing is with Achane is that this Ravens defense, statistically, they don't allow many yards to running backs. That's just because they're winning every game. They're always leading, so you're never in a game script when you can run. When teams do run against the Ravens are only 18th in run defense efficiency. They're much better as a pass defense. So I think the Dolphins, they will be able to run. This Ravens defense in the past has struggled with speed. I think about what happened when the Dolphins played the Ravens last year.
Yes.
You guys remember that? When the Tua and Tyreek and Waddle just lit them up in the fourth quarter. And so I think that Achane and Tyreek can potentially replicate some of that. So I would be, again, Achane is like a rich man's running back version of Gabe Davis, where he is the home run shot.
Yeah. Our first pass catcher today, guys, Davante Adams. While things have been really good for the Raiders in the Antonio Pierce era, Davante Adams hasn't always been a part of that. Jay, coming off a week where he had 1 catch for 4 yards, where the Raiders, a lot of it was their defense. They had a great game against the Chiefs. Hasn't really been the Davante show for the Raiders.
No, but I think you still have to start Davante Adams.
Right.
He's still Davante Adams, even though be a bit scared of the matchup in that the Colts can't tackle anyone right now. Their run defense, even with Grover Stewart back, if you get past Grover Stewart, then no one is tackling you on that team. The amount of missed tackles against the Falcons was completely absurd. So I think that with the success that the Raiders had running the ball against the Chiefs, they will lean on that again. But still, it's still Davante Adams. I think you have to start him no matter what.
Yeah, I think that game, the games change each and every week. You find different ways to win every week, and the way that the Raiders found a way to win was to play defense and not complete passes in the final 3 quarters against the Chiefs there. Adams still has had a 30 60+% target share in 3 straight games. And prior to this 1-catch, 4-yard game, Adams had 7 or more receptions in 3 of his last 4 games. So against an Indianapolis coach defense who middle of the pack when it comes to pass defense, you can't possibly expect Aiden O'Connell to do exactly that unless they're just playing, again, phenomenal defense to where they don't have to do anything. But Davante Adams, you cannot put him on your bench this week. We're keeping that open. I got him as wide receiver 13 this week.
All right, our next one, Stefon Diggs. I mean, this is the craziest number you'll hear today, but Stefon Diggs, 1 game with 50-plus receiving yards since Week 10, Lawrence. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if it's just Joe Brady's taken over and the offense has been diversified a couple other places like James Cook. But this is not the Stefon Diggs we've come to love that dominates in fantasy every single year.
Gonna keep it open for one, but have him as wide receiver 17, which you're still starting a wide receiver 17, even if it's Stefon Diggs. It's the lowest I've ranked him probably since his rookie year or something. But the Bills are just finding different ways to win against the Cowboys. Josh Allen only threw for 94 yards. Well, you didn't have to throw the ball to Stefon Diggs when James Cook was running all over him. He has had a 38% target share in back-to-back games, so it's not like he's hurting for targets. Him and Josh Allen just seem to be at a disconnect, and we gotta know at some point this is gonna work. But we're 1 game from the last game, and this is the fantasy championship, and people want to know, like, can I start him, or who should I start? Zay Jones or Parker Washington or someone? Like, no, definitely don't start Gabe Davis over Stefon Diggs. Like, don't get that crazy. You just gotta hope for the best and know that because the target share is there, you know, like, it's coming, even if it's the fantasy championship.
Jay, you'd think this is a game where you'd need him, though. New England isn't allowing anybody to run on them.
Yeah, you can't run on New England. And we saw that the Bills, they really leaned into the run against Dallas. You can't do that against New England. You can't have that success, at least. Nothing that the New England run defense has shown lately would suggest that. I think with Diggs, I don't want to speculate without any information, but I will and say that he just can't be right physically. He played 33 out of 55 snaps against the Chargers. Gabe Davis played 47. That just makes no sense whatsoever. He's been taken off the field on key 3rd downs, particularly in that game against the Eagles. Now, I will say, it's still Stefon Diggs. If Josh Allen places that interception to Gilman a little bit better, that's an 87-yard touchdown for Stefon Diggs in that game. And we're talking about him in a completely different light. So I think same thing as Davante Adams. The pedigree, the skill level is just too high. You have to start Diggs, but can't do it with a great deal of confidence.
If you've made it this far, there's a good chance George Pickens helped you with that. Season-high 35.5 fantasy points last week. And the best part, Jay, it was with Mason Rudolph. Can he keep this going against Seattle?
No, I wouldn't have thought so. I'd be closing it out on George Pickens. I understand that he had the magnificent game against the Bengals, but again, that's the epitome of George Pickens, who is that same archetype as Gabe Davis, where he needs to break these massive touchdown gains to be able to provide value. And as you can see, Matthew ranks him as wide receiver 35. Just behind Jackson Smith and Jigba playing in that game against Seattle. And also, I don't believe in Mason Rudolph. I don't think Mason Rudolph is very good, and so I would be shutting it down on George Pickens.
Yeah, Matthew has him at 35. I actually have George Pickens at wide receiver 40 this week. But congrats to you if you had the stones to start George Pickens in his first game with Mason Rudolph starting. 34% of his total fantasy points this whole season have come from his 5 touchdowns. So that's not something you want to depend on in a fantasy championship. Jay, like you mentioned, we kind of parallel the situation to a Gabe Davis. Now, I believe George Pickens is a better talent at the position than a Gabe Davis, but just due to the situation and basically for the whole season really at the quarterback position for Pittsburgh, again, this is another team who could be looking for another quarterback at some point. At that point, you'll see George Pickens elevate, but for Week 17 in your fantasy championship, he's got to watch from your bench.
Speaking of looking for a quarterback, Drake London of the Falcons, under 7 fantasy points in 3 of his past 4 games, Lawrence. And an even bigger problem, he has not scored a touchdown since week 4. Where do you rank him this week?
Yeah, not much further than George Pickens at wide receiver 38. He's another one, he can make the acrobatic catch, great body control there. But the problem is the Falcons won this game with Taylor Heineke handedly, quite frankly, and Drake London just wasn't involved there. You see him 3 for 39. He's got the one blow-up game there a few weeks back against the Buccaneers, but this is kind of Gabe Davis territory as well. If you're looking at the numbers on the screen here, he's got 5 or fewer targets in 3 of his last 4 games. It's crazy to think that as good as he is, he's only had 2 games this season with double-digit fantasy points. So this week, my man Drake London, I almost said Drake May.
We're shutting it down on Drake May as well. He's not playing in the NFL.
Yeah, he's not playing in the bowl game. But I'm going to close it out on Drake London this week.
Yep, I agree. I would close it down too. So since week 8, the Bears have the number 4 defense in the NFL. By the way, it's the number 1 defense in the NFL since week 8? The Las Vegas Raiders, which is stunning, but they're playing at a really high level. But the Bears, for a while, they were kind of a pass funnel defense, elite run D, more suspect pass defense. That has changed now. Now they're just a really good defense overall. They've been the number 8 pass defense since week 8. And Jalen Johnson, is he the best cornerback in the NFL? He's in that discussion,
He's due to get paid.
Yeah.
Pretty good timing.
He's going to get paid like
some
it.
ball. He's definitely playing some ball.
You get that matchup against Drake London. Also, the Falcons, I think they kind of rediscovered their identity a bit against the Colts. They're a team that wants to run the ball and wants to run it relentlessly. And even though it's a tough Bears run defense, I think they would rather take their chances against that than Heineke throwing against Jalen Johnson and co.
All right, let's recap Matthew's keep it open or close it out rankings. Joe Flacco against the Jets, QB 22. That's a close, but as Lawrence said, if you're in Superflex, you probably don't have anywhere else to go, so that's a fringe one there. Ty Chandler against the Packers, RB 25. That remains open. Achane against the Ravens is open as RB 26 when you go back to what he was able to do without Jalen Waddle in week 3. Devontae Adams against the Colts, still a top 20 play, wide receiver 18. That stays open. Same with Stefon Diggs against New England, who's not allowing anything on the ground. The Bills will have to throw. Diggs comes in as wide receiver 15 and open. George Pickens against the Seahawks. That's a close at wide receiver 35. And Drake London, who has had an up-and-down season largely because of what's gone on under center for the Falcons. He's wide receiver 39 for Matthew. That's a close as well. We are taking one more break. When we're back, it's last call. We'll tell you what we have circled on our card this weekend, right after this.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.